Well, good afternoon or good morning or good evening, wherever you are in the world. I realise that many of us are in perhaps strange places compared to what it would have been, say, 6 months ago. So hang in there. But welcome to the presentation on the Microapps integration architecture. My name is David Cottingham. I'm a product manager, and in particular, I own the Microapps platform. And what I want to do today is give you an overview of the Microapps platform. I don't want to go into huge amounts of detail. That's for other sessions, many of which you'll find at Converge this fall. But I want to give you the overview so that you understand, what are we trying to do, what's there, what can you do with it. Now let's see if this works. So jumping straight in, we hope. Here is a thing called a system of record. Now, system of record might be Salesforce, it might be Concur, it might be some weird legacy thing that's sitting on in somebody's desk at the office. That's fine. But what we're trying to do is bring actionable notifications like these into an end user's workspace. So Citrix works is about enabling people to get that productivity boost by having these things come to them rather than having to go into those individual systems of record. So the question is, well, how does this work? And that's really the point of this presentation. Now, I will say I feel a little bit like Ms. Frizzle here because, she's got a class and the kids say, how do batteries work? And it's like they go to the bus, they travel through the rainbows and the planets, and it's all great. I love XKCD, so credit to the author there. And they get off the bus, and what does she do? Well, she Googles Wikipedia, right? And I feel a little bit like that in the sense of some things I'm going to tell you are pretty obvious, really, but that's good. It means that they should be pretty intuitive. But stick with me because there are some things in here that I think are perhaps less obvious. So first things first, a little bit of terminology just to make sure we're all up to speed. So a system of record, an SOR, well, what's that? It's a thing you want to connect to, so the Salesforce or Concur or whatever it is. And an integration is the bridge between Microapps and the API of the system you're talking to. Clearly, you need some kind of bridge because we need to know what API you speak on the system record side. So here you go, here's some examples. Just a reminder, really, so Workday, SAP, etc. Those are all things that you want to talk to, and the way you want to talk to them is via an integration as an API bridge. So simple, but important. Now here is Citrix Cloud with, of course, our brand new logo. And what we've got is the workspace UI. It's connected up to, or accessed by, I should say, an end user. So you can see the workspace UI down there on the bottom right. And we've got a system like SAP Concur. Now we want clearly to make things appear in the workspace rather than what happens, if you like, today in the old world. I browse to SAP Concur and I get my stuff done, and that's fine. But can I now have things from SAP Concur turn up in my feed instead? Well, of course, the answer is yes. And we have this Microapps service. It then generates notifications, passes on notifications. Those go into the workspace UI and, of course, to the end user. But how do I get from SAP Concur to Microapps? Well, we have, as we said on the previous slide, an integration. That's your API bridge. And the question, of course, is how do you build these things? We'll go into that in a minute. But before you build one, you really should be thinking about what should I be sending and to whom should I be sending them? Because this is kind of important, right? Your end user's use case obviously matters. Well, here's an example. So Stella here is submitting an expense report through Concur for office supplies. Well, sounds good, right? Now, with apologies to Scott Adams, because I can't draw very well, the pointy head boss is here. And the pointy head boss, he says, well, yeah, I know there are 3 approvers, including me, for these expense reports, but I'm important. I don't want to get all these expense reports, right? This is crazy. And the problem is, of course, Seller actually submits one of these, I don't know, every week. She buys a lot of office supplies. And pointy head boss, he says, but no. I don't care about any of those. Send me ones only over 10K. Now, of course, you can't really do that in Concur. I mean, I guess you could do multi-level approvals or whatever, but the point I'm making is you can't by default set this thing up to just send you notifications for over 10K. They go to everyone or nobody. So what do you do? Good news, we can help you there because we have our own event engine inside the Microapps service. What does that mean? Well, two things. SaaS systems like, I don't know, Salesforce do generate some of their own events, and that's great. But when it comes to things like I only want to get notifications over $10K, you're a bit stuck, all or nothing, right? But by using Microapps service, we can enable you to decide what the notification thresholds are, for example. That flexibility and the ability to do, it says in the third bullet, cross-system criteria. So be able to say, well, actually, I want to look at both data from Concur and from Salesforce, let's say, means that we need to pull data into a cache in our cloud service. Now, that does mean we are storing a fair amount of data, but it also means you can generate your own events and filter and so on. As we said earlier, pointy head boss use case is now satisfied. So what do we pull from this cache? Well, it's only the data that are active. And what do we mean by that? Well, think about it in terms of Workday and how you might only pull a holiday or PTO that is active in the sense of either it's unapproved as yet or it's been approved in the last 6 months. We really don't need that PTO request that you put in 5 years ago. Not relevant, nobody cares. And so you can do this on the basis of, for example, has it been touched recently? Does it match a particular set of parameters and so on and so forth, right? And then what you're doing is generating those notifications and you want to pump them out to some other platform. Obviously, Workspace is the one we're talking about today. Fine, we've got through notifications and who we're going to send them to and kind of what they are, but how are we actually going to do this? How do we read the data? Well, the first things first, here's the diagram I had earlier, by the way. We are going to use a service account. The reason we use a service account is because we need to pull in the data relating to all of your users, not just one. And the efficient way of doing this is to have a read-only, but nonetheless service account that can pull in all users' data at once, or as many users as you're going to do this for. That gets pulled through that integration into the Microapps service, and it gets stored in a per tenant, encrypted, obviously, cache that is unique to you. So it is a single tenant service and then a single tenant cache. And then, of course, the Microapps service then generates notifications and publishes the user. How do we pull in the data? Well, quite simple, really. We have the concept of full synchronization and incremental synchronization. And it's kind of what it sounds like, really. You run a full synchronization where we throw away all the data from Concur, let's say, every 24 hours. So as you can see there, you've got the option of daily. And you run that, it pulls in all of the active data again. But then you obviously want to do some amount of incremental sync, so get the things that have changed every, let's say, 30 minutes. And that's what an incremental sync is for. So you can see here that we've got those two types. Now, the cache does mean that it's not a real-time system. Because you have those synchronization intervals, it means that something created just after a sync has run, well, it has to wait until the next sync happens in order to be picked up. So there is a certain amount of delay. And clearly, if you're running a sync every half hour, that may well be absolutely fine for some types of system, but for other types, you might need to run a sync a little bit more frequently. Now, if you are doing such things where someone might go in and change something on the target system. So for example, I might go directly to Concur and approve the expense report here, right? So instead of using the Microapp in Workspace to hit approve, I might log into Concur and do it there. Well, we've got a state in the cache that means that we've put a notification into people's workspace and now it's not valid. Well, the good news is that that's okay because yes, they've logged into Concur here and they've clicked the approval button, but the next time Workspace looks at the target system, so it runs a sync, that card will be expired out automatically, and so you won't have like a duplicate approval to do. So these things are considered, and it's all good. Now, question is, but I need speedy notifications. I need to go really fast. I need to not wait until the next sync. What do I do? Well, obviously the first answer is be patient. But assuming you can't be patient, or perhaps another criticism would be, I don't want to pull all this data all these many records into the cache. I just want to push, if you like, the notifications from my system in. So I've already got a way to create events. What can I do? Well, good news. Here is my Citrix Cloud again, a little bit more simplified now because I haven't bothered to put the integration blue box there. Here's the UI, and you'll notice here that we've got a little red box around Webhook listeners. So if you create a new integration, new HTTP integration, you can configure a Webhook listener. What that really means is it's an incoming webhook, so you get given a URI that's unique to your tenant. You have to play with some tokens to do that, but then build this up, you can push JSON into that webhook, which is basically key value pairs. If you think of it in the same way as the JSON you would get from a target system on a sync, so sync would be pulling the data in. Now we're saying, hey, some system out there on the internet can push data in to the cache via this incoming webhook. Just a little word of warning, I suppose. What we do is we reply to anything sent to that webhook with a 204 message. If you need some kind of more custom response, that is not available today. So as much as webhooks are super useful, obviously you have to push your messages to them in a format that our service understands, and you have to only expect a 204 response to the code coming back at you. But this is a way to enable you to get, I won't say real-time, but semi-real-time performance, because you're now pushing it in as soon as you generate the event, or as soon as the system generates the event, rather than waiting for that incremental sync. So there you go, that's one solution. Now, once you have the data in the cache, you can obviously use Microapps to do useful things with it. So what sort of useful things, what is a microapp? Right, let's go back to basics. So here's my definition. And it's really saying you have a single workflow, a single business case that your end user wants to do without launching the full application. And that's really important. And we'll see why in a minute. Here is the example I love to use. Some of you will recognize what this is. Some of you won't. It is a Japanese toilet control panel. And like all good control panels, it has some buttons at the top, which are your common use cases. And then you can pull down a flap to uncover all these myriad buttons on the bottom. See, the problem is there's too much functionality there. I don't have a clue. Well, I don't speak Japanese, but I also don't have a clue on what all these things do. And so what you're saying here is, here's the full 1,000 functions of my target system. But let's face it, there's a few functions which are super important, which are the common case. Okay, so with a microapp, it's exactly the same. You have a system of record, has 1,000 functions. You don't need to re-implement all of them. And so when I say don't re-implement the monolith here, you're not trying to implement 1,000 microapps for 1,000 use cases. You're just trying to take the really useful ones and put those into Workspace. This is super important because otherwise people automatically think, well, I need to re-implement every piece of functionality and kind of make the original system of record obsolete. No, that's not what you're trying to do. So hold on to the kind of 3 out of 1,000 use cases. Think of the Japanese toilet control panel there. And pity me, by the way, when I was confronted with that early in the morning. So here is Workspace. Citrix Workspace has a bunch of different elements, and we'll just take you through a few of them. So this one you should know by now. Notifications, they're cards, they appear in a user's feed, and they tell you things. And this one is just a notification. It's saying something's happened. That's great, good to know. This one's more interesting. It has a button, in fact, 2 buttons really. One is to approve it, the other is to send it back. That's fine. Now, you can also take action, not just from a feed card. So you can go and, for example, submit a quick expense. Again, we're talking about Concur, favorite thing here. Another thing you can do though, supposing I click that expense report, sorry, that create expense here. This blade opens out, comes in from the side, and a blade is made up of 1 or more pages. And you can link those pages together with buttons, and so you can fill in some data on this one, and then you can click a button to go to the next one, depending on what's what the flow is. Maybe you have multiple pages, right? But the point is that blades can come out from the side depending on where they're triggered from. They could be from a card, so you click that new expense report to get more detail from the card, or you might create one from that action on the top right. So we've talked about cards sometimes having buttons on them. And a button obviously has to do something in the form of pushing a write to the system of record. And so the user is performing a write back that says, I've approved, this particular purchase request. And so it's going to go back to Concur and say, yep, that request is all good, proceed, whatever the workflow in Concur is. So how do we do write backs? Well, this is a little bit different because, again, we've got the same Citrix cloud, we've got an integration, all that good stuff. But the write back action is, of course, initiated by the user on the bottom right there. Goes to the Microapps service, Microapps service says, yep, got it. You click the button. I know what to do with that. I will push that through the integration, because remember, the integration speaks the API of the target system. Knows how to do the auth, by the way, also super important, because we're going to, instead of using that service account that we talked about before, we're going to do this per user. Now, many of you will be familiar with this idea that you want to write back in the context of the user, because, of course, when it comes to things like auditing, you want to know that it was me, David, that did it, rather than Citrix Workspace, the service account. Means nothing, could have been any one of 10,000 users. So to do this, we need to ensure that Microapps has permission granted, authorized by the end user to write back in their name to, for example, Concur here. So it's super important to note that the first time, for many systems of record anyway, the first time a user tries to do a write back, they'll probably be greeted with a little pop-up that says, for example, from Concur, do you grant Workspace permission? Do you authorize it to act on your behalf? So again, per user, very, very important, of course, because we don't want to have the ability for having an all-powerful service account to go and write anywhere it likes. So that's fine. We can do writes. Of course, we've done the read, we've created notifications, we've got buttons to do writes. Life is good. Now, supposing that I create in Workspace a quick expense, and so I've said, please can I have approval to spend this $2,300. Let's say we do that at time equals 0. Okay, well now what? Well, there's an incremental sync, isn't there? Because we do these regular pulls of data from the systems of record at certain intervals. And just after that, let's say I go in and I somehow edit the amount in SAP Concur. Instead of 2,300, I now change it to 100,000. For whatever reason, I made a mistake, doesn't matter. Well, that's okay, but it happens a little bit after. Of course, it's happened before the next incremental sync, though. So what happens? The approver gets a card that says, hey, approve 2,300. But in the backend system, it's already gone up to 100,000. So now what do we do? When you click approve, did the 100,000 get expense approved, or did the 2,300 get approved? Well, let's put those numbers of timeline, just to make it easy for you, on here. Well, what happens? Well, the good news is that the system checks when you hit approve whether all the data that was in there is unchanged or not. And if it is, then fine, continue. But if it's not, then we basically push that back and say, new card with 100,000 in it is created, and sorry, that's not something you can approve because, of course, it's changed under your feet. So we do the right thing. Of course, this is super important because you can actually imagine this happening, particularly if you have a very long incremental sync interval. So one to bear in mind there. But you can now check before writing back with the HTTP integration, which is what you use to create these things. All right, user-initiated actions. You remember I had that panel on the top right where you could create a new expense or create a ticket or whatever it is, obviously people don't just respond to cards coming into their feed. Microapps are on the way to kick off workflows. And the key point here is those are things that almost certainly are a source of writebacks. So just keep in mind anything in that actions panel is pretty much guaranteed to be a writeback action. Now, we at Citrix have been busy and have been creating all sorts of integrations, and of course we're creating more, right? So you can see that there's all those nice bluish boxes on the right-hand side of my cloud. Well, that's great. But you know, as many as we build, there are always going to be systems that customers need to integrate. And so the question, of course, everybody asks is, well, how do I create another one of those boxes to integrate my favorite system? Well, of course, this is a developer conference, right? So this is where you come in. How do you go about creating things? Well, here's my Microapps service. My cloud is no longer nice and fluffy. It's become more box shaped, but never mind, it's still Citrix Cloud. You've got the cache, you're familiar with that one, and you've got a target system. Now, you are going to use the HTTP integration, which is the thing that we use now to create our integrations, or more and more of them. We're moving away from kind of custom code to using what everybody else is able to use. And you need a target system that speaks JSON, so JSON over REST. So far, so good. Now, if your target system speaks JSON over REST, you are fine. Life is good. If it doesn't, then we'll talk about that in a minute. But what I will just briefly mention is if you need something that needs, or that has the need rather, to do a little bit of data transformation, there is a session here at Converge, hunt the video down, around a feature that we have been looking into around providing some kind of scripting. So I encourage you to look at that and just see what potentially could happen in the future. Also caveats apply, so do watch the video there. But the point I'm making is that JSON at the moment is what you have to make do with. So if you don't speak JSON or your target system doesn't speak JSON, well, realistically, there are going to be a fair number of systems of record, SORs, that don't speak JSON over HTTPS. So yep, for whatever reason, that is still the case. So you are going to need some kind of wrapper, and we'll call that an API wrapper or a web service wrapper. Really what you're doing is translating from whatever that target system speaks to JSON over REST. Now, before you get too excited about that, yes, clearly that is more work, but also clearly this is an additional opportunity for people who want to sell services, because the customers are going to have lots and lots of such systems that need some amount of, I'm going to call it middleware writing, okay? And there's nothing wrong with that. If your middleware can speak to the target system and then speaks JSON on the outside, then you can make it talk to the HTTP integration within the Microapps service. So yes, it is more work, but more work normally means that you can ask for some services money as well. And of course, we are continuing to add features to that HTTP integration in order that you can connect to more and more systems. So I'm going to finish up here because I feel that I've given you hopefully at least, a rough overview of what we're doing and what the platform is there for. So just a little bit of a recap. Remember back to that Japanese toilet control panel, the scary thing I encountered rather early in the morning. Keep in mind, you're not trying to implement all 1,000 functions. You're trying to implement 2 or 3 out of the 1,000. Those are the things that Microapps are going to give real value for and that you want to put into the workspace. A little bit of vocabulary again, just make sure you're still up to speed. So integrations are the things that bridge between system of record and Citrix Cloud. And of course, Microapps use the data that you've managed to suck into, or of course push in via webhooks nowadays, into that cache that we've got in Citrix Cloud. Remember, it's a per tenant cache that is used to then provide data for Microapps. Because we've got that cache, it's not real time. Yes, Webhook can help there, but because we have the cache, it means we can run our own event generator. And for many of the legacy type of systems that customers will have, that's super important. Even for SaaS systems where you want to be able to be more in control, have finer grained control of what notifications turn up, this is super useful as well. The reads are via a service account. It is a read-only service account. You're trying to do bulk reads, so you want to do them across all users at once. Remember that full sync and incremental sync paradigm. And writes are per user, so that in the context of the user using OAuth, you get those audit advantages as well. And the final one on the slide, the HTTP integration. It assumes you've got JSON over REST. You'll need to wrap other systems in some kind of web services things that exposes JSON over REST today. But of course, we are doing more in that area. So just be aware of that. You need to make sure your thing does speak REST. And if it doesn't, somehow make it speak REST using that wrapper. With that, I am done. So of course, normally I would take questions, but in this format, I will look for people to ask questions on Slack. There are plenty of very well qualified mentors from the product team and engineering team on those channels. So do ask the questions, do have a look at the documentation, have a look at the developer.citrix.com site. There's a lot of articles on Microapps on there as well. And go and get your feet wet. You can go and get test instances. They are free. And try all this out, see what you think. With that, thank you very much for listening to me. And I hope that everyone is taking care of themselves. With that, I will end. Thank you very much.